The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with tension as Ambassador Zrakth of the Hegemony Alliance rose from his crystalline seat. His forearms gestured dramatically, while his translator device converted his chittering language into the common tongue that echoed through the vast dome. Representatives from 100 different species watched in silence, their various forms of breathing creating a symphony of atmospheric exchange. For 1,000 Earth years we have maintained the Great Peace, Zrakth declared, his compound eyes scanning the assembled delegates. 1,000 years without a single act of aggression between member species. 1,000 years of prosperity, trade, and mutual advancement. The human delegation sat quietly in their designated section, appearing remarkably calm for a species about to receive devastating news. Ambassador Chen Wei-Ming, a middle-aged woman with graying hair, kept her hands folded in her lap while her aide, Marcus Thompson, took notes on an old-fashioned tablet. Their composure stood in stark contrast to the nervous energy radiating from other delegates who had already been briefed on what was coming. However, Zrakth continued, his voice rising to a crescendo that made several smaller species flinch. The Hegemony Alliance has discovered something that changes everything, something that makes the continuation of peace impossible. A holographic display materialized above the chamber's center, showing detailed schematics of human military installations, shipyards, and manufacturing facilities. The images rotated slowly, revealing structures that dwarfed anything else in known space. Gasps and concerned chatter erupted from various delegations, but the humans remained perfectly still. During routine monitoring of member species activities, our intelligence networks discovered that humanity has been secretly constructing the largest military apparatus in galactic history, Zrakth announced. While we celebrated peace, they prepared for war. While we dismantled our fleets, they built dreadnoughts. While we converted weapons factories to civilian use, they created arsenals capable of destroying entire star systems. The Hegemony delegate activated another series of images showing human warships under construction. The vessels were massive, bristling with weapons that incorporated technology decades ahead of anything the Council had seen. Energy signatures suggested power cores that could fuel small cities, while armor plating appeared thick enough to withstand concentrated bombardment from entire fleets. These discoveries prove that humanity never truly embraced the Great Peace, Zrakth continued. They have violated every disarmament treaty, broken every trust, and turned the sacred bonds of the Galactic Council into a shield for their warmongering preparations. They have made a mockery of 1,000 years of progress. Ambassador Chen finally stirred, leaning forward slightly in her chair. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth as she whispered something to Marcus, who nodded and continued taking notes. Their reaction seemed almost amused, which only intensified the atmosphere of confusion and growing anger in the chamber. The Corinthian delegate, a tall, ethereal being with translucent blue skin, stood to address the assembly. If these accusations are true, then humanity must be held accountable. The Great Peace cannot survive such betrayal. "Oh, they are more than true," Zrakth replied, manipulating the holographic controls to display orbital defense platforms around Earth and its colonies. These installations could repel invasion fleets from multiple directions simultaneously. Human space is now an impenetrable fortress, built while we slept in peaceful ignorance. The Virillian representative, whose species resembled a cross between an octopus and a tree, extended several tentacles toward the display. The energy readings from their primary shipyards, they exceed our most optimistic projections for military production. How did they advance so quickly without anyone noticing? Because we trusted them, spat Zrakth. Because we believed their promises of peaceful coexistence while they laughed behind closed doors and planned our subjugation. At this accusation, Marcus Thompson actually chuckled audibly, causing dozens of alien heads to turn in his direction. He quickly covered his mouth and returned to his notes, but not before several delegates noticed his reaction. The human delegation's composure was beginning to seem less diplomatic and more confident. The hegemony ambassador continued his presentation, showing intelligence reports of human military exercises, technological developments, and strategic planning sessions. Each revelation painted humanity as a species that had spent the last millennium preparing for galactic conquest while maintaining a facade of peaceful cooperation. "We have analyzed their capabilities," Zrakth announced. "Their ships outnumber the combined fleets of the next 5 largest military powers. Their weapons technology surpasses our own by at least 2 generations. Their defensive installations could withstand siege warfare for centuries. This level of preparation can only mean one thing: humanity intends to declare war on the entire galaxy." The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations and demands for action. Species that had been allies for centuries began eyeing each other suspiciously, wondering who else might have been secretly preparing for conflict. The careful balance of trust that had maintained galactic peace for a millennium was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Through it all, Ambassador Chen remained serene. When the noise finally died down enough for her to be heard, she raised one hand in a gesture for attention. The simple movement commanded immediate silence from the entire assembly, which was remarkable given that humanity was supposedly the newest and least influential member of the Galactic Council. "Honored delegates," Chen said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics without any need for amplification. "I wonder if I might ask our hegemony friends a simple question." Zrakth's compound eyes focused on her with something approaching fury. "You dare to speak? You dare to address this assembly after being exposed as warmongers and treaty breakers?" Chen's smile widened slightly. "Oh, I'm not here to deny your accusations. They're completely accurate after all. Every ship, every weapon, every defensive platform you've shown us, we built all of it. We've been building it for exactly 1,000 years, just as you said." The admission sent shockwaves through the chamber. Several delegates began shouting demands for immediate military action against humanity, while others called for economic sanctions and complete isolation of human space. The noise grew so intense that the chamber's automated systems activated harmonic dampeners to prevent hearing damage to sensitive species. When order was finally restored, Chen continued as if nothing had happened. "My question is quite simple, really. In all your intelligence gathering, in all your surveillance and monitoring, did you happen to notice why we were building these weapons?" Zrakth's mandibles clicked rapidly in what humans had learned to recognize as extreme agitation. "The reason is obvious. You intend to conquer the galaxy." "Is it obvious?" Chen asked, tilting her head thoughtfully. "Because I'm looking at your presentation here, and I noticed something interesting about the timing. You said we've been building for 1,000 years, correct?" "Yes. The entire duration of the Great Peace." "And when exactly did we join the Galactic Council?" The hegemony delegate paused, confusion replacing some of his anger. 1,050 years ago. But what does that have to... So we joined the council, participated in peace negotiations, signed the initial treaties, and then immediately began the largest military buildup in galactic history, Chen observed. "That does seem strange, doesn't it? Almost like we knew something was going to happen." An uncomfortable silence settled over the chamber. Marcus Thompson was no longer even pretending to hide his amusement, openly grinning as he watched the various alien delegates try to puzzle out the implications of Ambassador Chen's words. The Corinthian delegate spoke first, her ethereal voice carrying a note of growing concern. "Are you suggesting that humanity somehow predicted the end of the Great Peace?" "Oh, not predicted," Chen replied cheerfully. "We caused it." The silence that followed was so complete that the chamber's environmental systems seemed loud by comparison. Every delegate sat frozen, trying to process what they had just heard. Even Zrakh's clicking mandibles had gone quiet. Chen stood and walked to the center of the chamber, her movements casual and unhurried. You see, when we first received the invitation to join the Galactic Council, we were quite excited. 1,000 species working together in peace and harmony, it sounded wonderful. But then we studied galactic history, and we noticed some troubling patterns. She gestured toward the holographic display, which now showed historical data instead of military installations. Every great peace in galactic history has ended the same way. One species or alliance grows too powerful, decides they deserve to rule everyone else, and launches a war of conquest. The last time it happened was about 1,500 years ago, which means we were overdue for another one. The display showed the rise and fall of various galactic empires, each one following a remarkably similar pattern of growth, expansion, and eventual collapse through warfare. The mathematical models were elegant and disturbing. They suggested that galactic peace was nothing more than a temporary lull between inevitable periods of massive conflict. We realized that someone was going to break the peace eventually, Chen continued. The only questions were who and when, so we decided to make sure we were ready for whoever made the first move. Zrakh found his voice again, though it came out as more of a strangled whisper. You're saying you've spent 1,000 years preparing for a war that hadn't happened yet? Exactly. And based on recent hegemony fleet movements, territorial expansion, and resource acquisition patterns, we calculated that you would be the ones to break the peace within the next solar year. Congratulations on meeting our projections so precisely. The hegemony delegate's forearms began trembling with rage. This is impossible. Our decision to act was made only days ago, after discovering your military preparations. Chen nodded sympathetically. Yes, that's what we were counting on. You see, we've been very careful to make our preparations visible to your intelligence networks for the past 50 years. Not obvious enough to alarm anyone prematurely, but clear enough that a thorough investigation would reveal everything you've shown us today. The implications hit the chamber like a physical force. Species that had been preparing to condemn humanity were suddenly reconsidering everything they thought they knew about the situation. The humans hadn't just been preparing for war, they had been orchestrating it. We knew that whoever was planning to break the peace would use our military buildup as justification, Chen explained. It's much easier to rally support for conquest when you can point to an external threat. So we gave you exactly what you needed to convince your alliance that humanity had to be stopped. Marcus Thompson finally stood and joined his ambassador in the center of the chamber. When he spoke, his voice carried the same casual confidence that was beginning to unnerve even the most seasoned diplomats present. The beauty of it is that you would have declared war anyway, he said. Your species has been planning galactic conquest for at least 2 centuries. We've been monitoring your preparations almost as long as you've been monitoring ours. The only difference is that we were better at it. The holographic display shifted again, now showing detailed intelligence on hegemony military installations, battle plans, and alliance negotiations with other aggressive species. The information was so comprehensive and detailed that it was clear humanity had been conducting surveillance operations that made the hegemony's efforts look amateurish by comparison. Every ship in your fleet, every weapon system, every strategic plan, we know about all of it, Marcus continued. We've known about your intentions for decades. We've been waiting for you to make your move so we could respond appropriately. Zrakh was no longer standing upright, his forearms supporting him against his seat as the full scope of human manipulation became clear. You manipulated us into declaring war? Not manipulated, Chen corrected. We simply provided you with the excuse you were already looking for. You were always going to choose war over continued peace. We just made sure you chose to fight us instead of someone who might actually be vulnerable." The chamber remained silent as delegates struggled to understand the implications of what they were hearing. Humanity had not only prepared for war, they had engineered the circumstances that would bring it about, ensuring they would face their enemies on terms of their own choosing. Ambassador Chen returned to her seat, her expression still showing that slight, confident smile that had never wavered throughout the entire session. Marcus Thompson resumed taking notes as if they had been discussing trade agreements rather than galactic war. "So yes," Chen said, addressing the assembly one final time, "the Hegemony Alliance is absolutely correct. We have violated every disarmament treaty, built the largest military force in galactic history, and spent 1,000 years preparing for war while pretending to embrace peace. We are everything they claim we are, and worse." She paused, allowing her words to sink in completely before delivering her closing statement. "The only question now is whether the rest of you are going to side with the aggressors who just declared war on a peaceful member of the Galactic Council, or stand with the species that spent a millennium preparing to defend galactic civilization from those who would destroy it." The human delegation collected their materials and walked calmly from the chamber, leaving behind an assembly of alien species who were beginning to realize that everything they thought they knew about humanity, about peace, and about war itself was about to change forever. Admiral Vextar stood on the command bridge of the Hegemony flagship, Eternal Dominance, watching the tactical display show the largest war fleet ever assembled in galactic history. 3,000 ships from 47 different species stretched across space in perfect formation, their combined firepower enough to glass entire worlds. The Allied Armada represented the culmination of centuries of careful preparation and alliance building. "All ships report ready for jump to human space," announced Communications Officer Thrilak, her 6 arms dancing across multiple control panels simultaneously. Fleet composition confirmed: 800 dreadnoughts, 1,200 heavy cruisers, 1,000 destroyers, and support vessels. Total crew complement, 4.7 million. Vextar nodded, his scaled features reflecting the bridge's tactical lighting. As a Hegemony war chief with over 3 centuries of combat experience, he had commanded fleets in dozens of conflicts. None had been as straightforward as this operation promised to be. The humans had revealed their hand too early, allowing the Hegemony to assemble overwhelming force before striking. "Intelligence reports confirm human fleet positions," Vextar asked. "Yes, Admiral. Their main battle group is stationed at the Sol system, just as our projections indicated. Approximately 400 ships total, concentrated around their homeworld. Standard defensive formation." The Admiral studied the holographic display showing human space. 57 star systems, 38 inhabited worlds, and only 400 ships to defend them all. Even accounting for the humans' supposedly advanced technology, the mathematics were simple. The Allied Armada outnumbered them more than 7-1. "Their overconfidence will be their downfall," Vextar observed. "They spent 1,000 years building weapons instead of alliances. No species can stand alone against the combined might of the galaxy." Captain Zeth Moore of the Coranthian contingent approached the command station, her translucent form shimmering with nervous energy. "Admiral, my government is still concerned about the humans' claims at the council session. What if they were telling the truth about manipulating us?" Vextar's laugh was a harsh, guttural sound that made several bridge officers flinch. "Manipulation? They showed their hand when they built those installations. No amount of clever words can change the tactical reality we're facing. They have 400 ships. We have 3,000. This will be over in hours." The communications array chimed with an incoming priority message. Thrilak's expressions showed confusion as she read the transmission. "Sir, we are receiving a message from Earth. Audio only. It's addressed to you personally." "Put it through." The bridge filled with a calm, female voice speaking in perfect hegemony dialect. "Admiral Vextar, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Seoul Defense Force. I believe you knew my grandmother, Ambassador Chen Wei-Ming, from the council session 3 days ago." Vextar's scaled hide prickled with surprise. How did the humans know his personal command codes? How had they learned to speak fluent hegemony without any apparent accent? "Human Admiral, you are addressing the commander of a lawful military action authorized by the Galactic Council. Surrender now, and your species will be granted merciful terms." "Oh, I'm not calling to surrender," Admiral Chen replied, and even through the audio transmission, her amusement was clearly audible. "I'm calling to give you one final chance to reconsider. Turn your fleets around, return to your home systems, and we'll pretend this whole thing never happened." The bridge erupted in incredulous chatter. Captain Zethmore actually laughed, a sound like crystal chimes in a windstorm. "Admiral, they're offering us mercy? 400 ships are offering mercy to 3,000? Vexatar silenced the bridge with a gesture. "Human Admiral, your bravado is impressive but pointless. We know exactly how many ships you have. We know their positions, their capabilities, and their weaknesses. You cannot possibly believe you can win this engagement." "You're absolutely right," Admiral Chen agreed cheerfully. "We can't possibly win. That would require us to actually fight you." Before Vextar could ask what that meant, his tactical officer shouted an alarm. "Admiral! Energy spikes detected throughout the fleet. All ships reporting massive power fluctuations." The main display flickered and changed, showing the Allied armada from an external perspective. Every ship in the formation was glowing with strange energy patterns that seemed to dance across their hulls like living things. Warning klaxons began sounding from multiple stations as systems throughout the fleet started experiencing failures. "What's happening?" Vextar demanded. "Unknown, sir. All ships report the same phenomenon. It's like some kind of electromagnetic interference, but the source is unclear." "Wait." The tactical officer paused, studying his readings with growing alarm. "Sir, it's not affecting our systems. It's affecting our crews." Captain Zethmore suddenly stumbled, her translucent form flickering like a damaged hologram. Around the bridge, other alien crew members were showing similar signs of distress, difficulty breathing, coordination problems, and in some cases, complete collapse. "This is impossible," Vextar growled, fighting off his own growing disorientation. "No weapon can target biological systems across such distances while leaving technology untouched." Admiral Chen's voice returned to the communications system, still maintaining that unnervingly cheerful tone. "Actually, it's quite possible when you understand the underlying principles. You see, every species in your fleet evolved on a different world, with different atmospheric compositions, different gravitational conditions, and different radiation environments. But you all share something in common." The energy patterns dancing across the Allied ships began to intensify, and crew members throughout the fleet were reporting increasing symptoms of what appeared to be severe space sickness. Navigation officers couldn't focus on their instruments, gunners couldn't target their weapons, engineers couldn't maintain their systems. "What we all share," Chen continued, "is that we evolved as biological entities in three-dimensional space. Our nervous systems, our sensory organs, our brain chemistry, they all operate according to the same basic electromagnetic principles. Principles that can be influenced with the right technology." Vextar realized with growing horror what the human admiral was describing. "Neurological warfare. You're directly attacking our nervous systems." "Not attacking, adjusting. We're simply making it very difficult for your crews to function in a combat environment. Think of it as the galaxy's most advanced motion sickness, combined with the worst hangover you've ever experienced, plus a touch of sensory confusion that makes it nearly impossible to distinguish up from down." The tactical display now showed that less than 10% of the Allied fleet was still combat-capable. Thousands of ships drifted helplessly through space as their crews struggled with symptoms that made it impossible to perform their duties. Some vessels were already beginning to drift out of formation as automated systems tried to compensate for crews that could no longer function. "This is a violation of every law of warfare," Captain Zethmore managed to say through her obvious distress. "Biological weapons are forbidden under galactic conventions." "Oh, this isn't a biological weapon," Chen replied. "It's a technological one. We're not introducing any foreign substances into your systems. We're just using advanced electromagnetic manipulation to temporarily disrupt certain neural pathways. Completely reversible, minimal long-term effects, and targeted specifically at the brain regions responsible for spatial coordination and combat reflexes." Vextar forced himself to focus, despite the growing confusion in his own mind. How is this possible? No species has this level of understanding of cross-species neurology. Well, that's the advantage of having 1,000 years to study every member of the Galactic Council. While you were all sharing scientific and medical data in the spirit of peaceful cooperation, we were learning exactly how your brains work. Turns out, when you understand the underlying electromagnetic patterns of consciousness itself, you can do some very interesting things. The Admiral managed to access his command console and check the fleet's status. The reports were devastating. 90% of ships were reporting crew incapacitation. Weapon systems were offline not because they were damaged, but because no one could operate them effectively. Navigation was impossible because officers couldn't tell which direction they were facing. "You're going to massacre helpless crews," Vextar accused, though he wasn't sure how the humans intended to destroy 3,000 ships with only 400. "Actually, we're not going to fire a single shot," Chen said. "We don't need to." New contacts began appearing on the tactical display. Human ships decloaking throughout the Allied formation. But these weren't the 400 vessels the hegemony intelligence had detected. Thousands of ships materialized from what had appeared to be empty space, surrounding the disabled alien fleet completely. "Stealth technology," Vextar whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. "You've had ships here all along." "Not just here," Chen confirmed. "Admiral, would you mind checking the status of your home systems?" With growing dread, Vextar accessed the long-range communications array. The reports that came back were impossible to believe. Every major hegemony world was reporting the same phenomenon. Human ships appearing from nowhere, not attacking, just present, orbiting their planets, positioned near their space stations, surrounding their remaining defensive fleets. "How many ships do you actually have?" Vextar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Enough," Chen replied simply, "though I should mention that the 400 ships you detected around Earth were just the ones we wanted you to see. Our actual defensive force is somewhat larger." The tactical display updated to show the true scope of human military presence. Not hundreds of ships, but hundreds of thousands. They had been hiding in asteroid fields, cloaked in empty space, disguised as civilian vessels, and concealed using technology that made them completely invisible to every known detection method. Captain Zethmore, despite her obvious distress, managed to ask the question that was on everyone's mind. "How did you hide so many ships? Our intelligence networks monitor everything." "Your intelligence networks monitor everything they're capable of detecting," Chen corrected. "We've been using quantum phase cloaking for about 600 years now. It renders ships completely undetectable to any scanning technology based on conventional electromagnetic principles. Since every known species uses some variation of electromagnetic sensors, we've been effectively invisible." The communications officer, Thrilak, was struggling to remain at her station despite the neurological interference. "Admiral Chen, what do you want? What are your terms?" "Terms?" Chen sounded genuinely confused. "Oh, we don't have any terms. We're not here to negotiate." "Then what do you want?" Vextar demanded. "We want you to go home, all of you. Return to your systems, disband this alliance, and resume the peaceful activities you were engaged in before this unfortunate misunderstanding. Consider this a demonstration of what happens when you threaten humanity." The Admiral tried to process what he was hearing. "You're letting us go? After we declared war on you?" "Well, technically, you haven't declared war yet. You've assembled a fleet and entered our space, but you haven't actually attacked anything. From a legal standpoint, this is still just a very large military exercise that got a little out of hand." Vextar realized that the humans were offering them a way to save face while avoiding total destruction. Every ship in the Allied fleet was completely helpless. The humans could have destroyed them all within minutes, but instead, they were providing an opportunity to retreat with some semblance of dignity intact. "And if we refuse?" he asked. "Oh, I don't think you'll refuse," Chen said, and now her voice carried a note of something much colder than amusement. "Because in about 30 minutes, the neurological interference will wear off and your crews will be back to normal, but they'll have had plenty of time to think about what just happened. They'll realize that humanity disabled the largest war fleet in galactic history without firing a single shot. They'll understand that we could have killed them all, but chose not to." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "More importantly, they'll know that we have the technology to do this anytime, anywhere, to any fleet that threatens us. Do you really think any of your alliance partners are going to want to try this again?" The Admiral looked around his bridge at crew members who were slowly beginning to recover from the neurological attack. The expressions on their faces ranged from terror to awe to complete demoralization. These were experienced military personnel who had just witnessed capabilities that exceeded their worst nightmares. "The Galactic Council will demand explanations," Vextar said weakly. "I'm sure they will, and we'll be happy to provide them. We'll explain how we detected the formation of your alliance 3 months ago, how we tracked your fleet movements, and how we developed countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize your combined forces without causing permanent harm." Chen's voice took on a more official tone. "We'll also be submitting a formal complaint about the unprovoked military action taken against a peaceful member of the Galactic Council, along with evidence of the extensive planning and coordination that went into this attack, including recordings of alliance meetings, copies of battle plans, and detailed intelligence on the participating species' military capabilities." The Admiral realized that humanity had been recording everything. Every secret meeting, every strategic planning session, every piece of classified intelligence that the Alliance had thought was secure. The humans had been watching and listening to the entire conspiracy from the beginning. "How long have you been monitoring us?" he asked. "Since the day each of your species joined the Galactic Council. We told you. We've been preparing for this for 1,000 years. Did you think we were just building ships and weapons? We've been building intelligence networks, developing surveillance technology, and infiltrating every major government in the galaxy." The scope of human preparation was beyond anything Vexatar had imagined. They hadn't just been ready for war. They had been actively managing galactic affairs for centuries, probably influencing events in ways no one had ever suspected. "The other species will never trust you again," Captain Zethmore observed. "Maybe, but they'll never attack us again either. And honestly, trust is overrated. Respect is much more useful." Admiral Chen's final transmission came through with crisp authority. "You have 1 hour to begin withdrawal from human space. Any ships that remain after that time limit will be escorted out by our forces. Please ensure your crews understand that this is not a negotiation. This is us being polite." The communication channel closed, leaving the bridge of the Eternal Dominance in stunned silence. Around them, the Allied fleet was slowly recovering from the neurological attack, but the damage to morale was permanent. Every crew member in the Armada now knew exactly how helpless they had been and how easily the humans could have destroyed them all. Vextar looked at the tactical display showing thousands of human ships surrounding his disabled fleet. Ships that had been invisible minutes earlier, using technology that rendered conventional military doctrine completely obsolete. Ships crewed by a species that had spent a millennium preparing for this exact scenario. "Signal the fleet," he ordered quietly. "All ships are to begin immediate withdrawal to home systems. Operation Galactic Unity is postponed indefinitely." As the Allied Armada slowly began its humiliating retreat, Vextar couldn't help but wonder what other surprises humanity had prepared. If this demonstration was what they considered a polite warning, what would an actual military response look like? He was fairly certain he never wanted to find out. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened just 48 hours after the failed hegemony invasion, but the chamber felt fundamentally different from the one where war had been declared. Representatives who had sat in rigid diplomatic formations now clustered in nervous groups, whispering among themselves and casting uncertain glances toward the human delegation. Ambassador Chen Wei-Ming had returned, but she was no longer alone. Admiral Sarah Chen sat beside her, still wearing her military uniform, with the insignia of the Seoul Defense Force clearly visible. Behind them stood a small group of human officials whose presence somehow made the vast chamber feel smaller and more confined. Secretary General Mordeth of the Tellarian Union called the session to order, his usually commanding voice carrying a note of uncertainty that had never been there before. "The Council recognizes the unprecedented events of the past week and acknowledges the need for clarification regarding humanity's status and capabilities." A nervous murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Every species present had received detailed reports from their military advisors about what had happened to the Hegemony Alliance. Ships that had appeared from nowhere, technology that could disable entire fleets without causing permanent harm, intelligence networks that had apparently been monitoring galactic civilization for centuries. "Before we begin formal proceedings," Mordeth continued, "the chair recognizes that several species have requested emergency military consultations with their home governments." The Virillian delegate's tentacles writhed with agitation as she spoke. "Secretary General, my government needs to understand the scope of human military presence in our territory. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected anomalies that suggest human vessels may have been operating in our systems for an extended period." Ambassador Chen stood slowly, her movements deliberate and unthreatening. "Honored delegates, perhaps this would be an appropriate time to address some of the questions that have arisen since our recent misunderstanding with the Hegemony Alliance." She gestured toward Admiral Chen, who activated a holographic projector that filled the center of the chamber with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Unlike the displays that had been shown during the previous session, this one showed the true extent of human presence throughout known space. The silence that followed was absolute. Every star system in the galaxy showed some level of human activity: monitoring stations, cloaked vessels, communication relays, an infrastructure that had been completely invisible to conventional detection methods. The scope of the revelation was staggering. "For the past 800 years," Admiral Chen explained, "humanity has maintained what we call the Silent Fleet, vessels positioned throughout galactic space to monitor, observe, and, when necessary, intervene in situations that might threaten the stability of civilization." The Corinthian representative's ethereal form flickered with distress. "You've been spying on every species in the galaxy for 8 centuries? "Not spying," Ambassador Chen corrected. "Observing. There's an important distinction. We haven't been stealing secrets or manipulating your governments. We've been watching for the signs that historically indicate when galactic peace is about to collapse. The display zoomed in on several specific regions, showing detailed timelines of events that had led to previous galactic conflicts. The human analysis was remarkably accurate, predicting the rise and fall of aggressive powers with mathematical precision. Every major war in galactic history has followed the same basic pattern, Admiral Chen continued. A period of technological advancement, followed by resource competition, leading to territorial expansion and culminating in alliance formation for the purpose of conquest. We've been monitoring these patterns and intervening when necessary to prevent catastrophic conflicts. Secretary General Mordeth leaned forward in his chair. Intervening? What kind of interventions? The holographic display shifted to show a series of historical events that every delegate recognized. The collapse of the Zephyrian Empire 300 years ago, the sudden technical failures that had prevented the Mordanian expansion 2 centuries past, the mysterious disappearance of the Vorthon war fleet 50 years earlier. Each of these events was attributed to internal political problems or technical failures at the time, Ambassador Chen observed. In reality, they were carefully orchestrated interventions designed to prevent wars that would have killed billions and set galactic civilization back centuries. The implications were staggering. Humanity had been secretly managing galactic affairs for 8 centuries, preventing conflicts before they could begin and steering the course of history toward continued peace. Every major political development, every technological breakthrough, every diplomatic resolution had potentially been influenced by human manipulation. The draconian delegate, whose species prided itself on military honor, spoke with barely controlled anger. You've been treating us like children for 800 years, making decisions about our future without our knowledge or consent. Yes, Admiral Chen replied simply. And during those 800 years, galactic civilization has experienced unprecedented peace, prosperity, and technological advancement. Coincidence? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Every species present had benefited enormously from the extended period of stability. Scientific advancement had accelerated beyond all historical precedent. Trade had flourished. Colonies had been established throughout the galaxy. The standard of living for billions of sentient beings had improved dramatically. The Hegemony Alliance represented the first serious threat to galactic stability in over 3 centuries, Ambassador Chen explained. We hoped that our military preparations would be sufficient deterrent to prevent them from acting on their aggressive impulses. Unfortunately, they decided to proceed anyway. The Hegemony delegate, Admiral Vextar, had been permitted to attend the session despite his species' recent actions. He sat in what had traditionally been a position of honor, but now seemed more like the defendant's chair in a courtroom. You manipulated us into attacking you. You wanted this conflict. We wanted you to reveal your intentions, Admiral Chen corrected. The Hegemony Alliance had been planning galactic conquest for over 2 centuries. Your alliance partners were already committed to supporting military action against anyone who opposed your expansion. We simply provided you with a target that could defend itself. The display showed detailed intelligence reports on the Hegemony's military preparations, alliance negotiations, and strategic planning sessions. The documentation was so comprehensive that it included recordings of private conversations between alliance leaders discussing which species they would target first after eliminating humanity. Every one of your alliance partners knew they were participating in a war of conquest, Admiral Chen continued. They weren't deceived or manipulated into supporting your cause. They joined because they wanted their share of the spoils when you divided the galaxy among yourselves. Several delegates from species that had contributed to the alliance shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The human intelligence had apparently captured not just military planning, but also the economic agreements that would have divided conquered territories and resources among the participating powers. The Altarian delegate, whose crystalline form resonated with harmonic frequencies when agitated, spoke in tones that translated as extreme distress. If humanity possesses such comprehensive surveillance capabilities, what prevents you from simply taking control of the galaxy yourselves? Ambassador Chen smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, her expression seemed genuinely warm rather than merely diplomatic. An excellent question. Admiral, would you care to explain our current military doctrine? Admiral Chen manipulated the holographic display to show human space in detail. Instead of the massive fleets and defensive installations that might be expected from a galactic superpower, the images showed something quite different. Small distributed forces focused primarily on monitoring and response capabilities rather than occupation or conquest. Humanity learned from studying galactic history that conquest is ultimately self-defeating, Admiral Chen explained. Every empire that has tried to control the galaxy has eventually collapsed under the weight of managing thousands of different species across millions of star systems. The logistics alone are impossible to sustain long-term. The display showed the mathematical models that supported this conclusion: economic analyses, population dynamics, resource distribution patterns, and communication limitations that made galactic empires inherently unstable. Our strategy is much simpler. We maintain sufficient force to prevent anyone else from conquering the galaxy, and we let everyone else govern themselves however they choose. As long as you don't threaten galactic stability, we don't interfere with your internal affairs. The Corinthian delegate's form flickered with what humans had learned to recognize as deep thought. So you're not rulers. You're guardians? Shepherds, Ambassador Chen corrected. We keep the wolves away from the flock, but we don't tell the sheep where to graze. The analogy was somewhat insulting, but also remarkably accurate. Humanity had positioned itself as the protector of galactic civilization rather than its conqueror. They prevented major conflicts, but otherwise allowed each species to develop according to its own nature and interests. Secretary General Mordeth addressed the question that every delegate was thinking. What happens now? How do we proceed with this new understanding of humanity's role in galactic affairs? Admiral Chen deactivated the holographic display and returned to her seat. When Ambassador Chen stood to address the assembly, her demeanor had shifted from diplomatic courtesy to something approaching parental authority. The answer to that question depends entirely on what you choose to do next, she said. Humanity has no interest in ruling the galaxy, but we also have no intention of allowing anyone else to rule it either. The Great Peace will continue, whether you like it or not. The blunt statement sent ripples of shock through the chamber. Several delegates began to protest, but Ambassador Chen continued before they could object. However, we're willing to make this arrangement more transparent than it has been in the past. Instead of secretly preventing conflicts before they begin, we can establish formal mechanisms for conflict resolution. Instead of hidden surveillance networks, we can create open intelligence sharing protocols. Instead of anonymous interventions, we can provide visible peacekeeping forces. The offer was both generous and terrifying. Humanity was proposing to step out of the shadows and take an official role as galactic peacekeepers. It would mean the end of the illusion that the various species were truly independent, but it would also mean the end of the fear and uncertainty that had characterized the past week. The Tylarian delegate spoke first. What would this new arrangement look like in practical terms? The Galactic Council would continue to function exactly as it has, Ambassador Chen replied. You would make your own laws, govern your own territories, and conduct your own affairs. The only difference would be that humanity would have a permanent seat on the Security Council with authority to intervene in situations that threaten galactic stability. It was essentially what had been happening for centuries, but now it would be official and subject to some level of democratic oversight. The various species would retain their autonomy while acknowledging humanity's role as the ultimate guarantor of peace. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some delegates argued for complete independence, even if it meant the risk of renewed warfare. Others supported the proposal as a reasonable compromise that formalized an existing reality. A few suggested alternative arrangements that would distribute peacekeeping responsibilities among multiple species. Throughout the discussions, the human delegation remained patient and calm, answering questions and addressing concerns without showing any sign of impatience or irritation. They seemed genuinely committed to finding a solution that every species could accept, even if it took considerable time to negotiate. As the formal session drew to a close, Admiral Vextar requested permission to address the assembly. His appearance had changed dramatically since the failed invasion. The confidence and aggression that had characterized his previous speeches were completely gone, replaced by something approaching humility. "Honored delegates," he said, his voice carrying none of its former authority. "The Hegemony Alliance wishes to formally withdraw our declaration of hostilities against humanity and to apologize for our actions. We misjudged the situation." It was a remarkable admission from a species that had spent centuries planning galactic conquest. The failed invasion had apparently convinced the hegemony that their imperial ambitions were completely unrealistic. "More importantly," Vextar continued, "we wish to state for the record that the human response to our aggression was far more restrained than it could have been. They had the capability to destroy our entire fleet, but they chose to simply disable us and allow us to withdraw. This level of restraint from a superior military power is unprecedented in galactic history." The Admiral's words carried weight because everyone present knew they were absolutely true. The Hegemony Alliance had declared war on humanity, assembled the largest invasion fleet in galactic history, and entered human space with the explicit intention of conquest. The fact that they had been allowed to return home with their ships and crews intact was indeed unprecedented. "The Hegemony Alliance pledges to support whatever arrangement the Council chooses regarding humanity's role in maintaining galactic peace," Vextar concluded. "We have learned that some responsibilities are too important to be entrusted to those who seek them for personal gain." The session ended with a formal vote scheduled for the following week, but the outcome was already clear. Humanity would take its place as the official guardian of galactic civilization, ending 1,000 years of hidden influence with open acknowledgement of their unique role. As delegates filed out of the chamber, many paused to speak with the human representatives. The conversations were awkward but respectful, acknowledgments of a new reality that everyone was still trying to understand. Ambassador Chen remained in her seat until the chamber was nearly empty, then turned to her granddaughter with a satisfied smile. "Well, that went better than expected." Admiral Chen nodded, reviewing notes on her tablet. "The transition should be relatively smooth. Most species were already unconsciously deferring to our judgment on security matters. Making it official just eliminates the pretense. Any regrets about ending the secret approach?" The Admiral considered the question carefully before answering. "No. The galaxy is too complex now for covert management. Better to be honest about our capabilities and let everyone make informed decisions about their future." Ambassador Chen stood and gathered her materials, looking around the chamber that had witnessed such dramatic changes over the past week. "Besides, I think everyone will sleep better knowing there's someone watching out for the wolves." As the human delegation left the council chambers, they walked into a galaxy that was fundamentally different from the one they had entered just 7 days earlier. The Great Peace would continue, but now everyone knew exactly who was responsible for maintaining it, and perhaps more importantly, everyone knew exactly what happened to those who tried to break it.